Every day, we look out at the world and believe we see reality. We navigate its rules, we judge its contours, and we trust our senses implicitly. But what if the life you are living right now, the struggles, the ambitions, the accepted truths, is nothing more than a magnificent, convincing illusion? What if your own mind is the greatest deceiver, and the true nature of things lies just beyond the veil of what you accept as real? There's a way of seeing that doesn't merely look at things, but through them. A way of vision that doesn't belong to the eyes at all. Some have called it the third eye. Not a mystical jewel in the forehead, but a faculty of the mind. The capacity to notice illusions, to turn toward what is real, and to live from that recognition. Every culture has discovered in its own language that we are easily deceived. We mistake shadows for forms, the map for the territory, the story for the truth. The Greeks dramatized this in the image of a cave. The sages of India named it Maya, the shimmering play of appearances. The Buddha pointed not to a single grand deception, but to countless tiny ones. How we cling, project, and suffer. The third eye of the mind opens not with thunder, but with a simple shift. We begin to notice our seeing. Plato imagines a group of people chained in a cave, their backs to the sunlight, taking flickering shadows on a wall for reality. Socrates, ever the midwife of truth, doesn't hand them answers. He asks questions that make the chains feel uncomfortably tight. If we're honest, we know this cave. It is the feed we scroll, the opinions we inherit, the roles we perform, the feelings we never examine because they just feel true. The third eye invites a little distance. What am I taking for granted? What is the light I'm turning away from? The Buddha offers another map. He begins with experience, sights, sounds, sensations, thoughts. Notice how they arise, change, and vanish. Notice how the mind claims them. Mine, me, I. Suffering blooms when we grip. Freedom appears when we see. All conditioned things are impermanent, the Buddha teaches. Short enough to print on a card, deep enough to require a lifetime. If we really knew this, how softly we would hold the world. And then the Upanishads whisper, Tat Twam Asi, that thou art. A sentence like a lightning flash. It doesn't inflate the ego, it dissolves its boundary. The same life shining in the eyes of another is shining here. The third eye of the mind does not add a belief, it subtracts illusion. It is the art of seeing that the surface is not the end of the story. Part 1. The texture of illusion. Illusions come in at least 3 textures. First, sensory illusion. Our brains are prediction machines. They guess the world and update the guess. This is efficient, but it means we see more of our models than the raw world. Color isn't in the apple, it's in the interaction of light, object, and nervous system. Most of the time that's fine, but when we mistake our interpretation for reality, trouble begins. Second, social illusion. We inherit scripts about success, love, status, even happiness. We rehearse them so often that they feel like nature. Socrates would ask, "Who told you this? What is it for? What happens if you live without it?" The point was never cynicism. It was to exchange borrowed certainty for examined life. He said, "The unexamined life is not worth living, not as a scold, but as an invitation to depth." Third, psychological illusion. We take our passing moods as permanent forecasts, our fear as prophecy, our stories as fate. We tell ourselves we're the kind of person who, and then live down to the sentence. The Buddha would offer compassion here. Thoughts are weather, not climate. Feelings are visitors. You are not the house they visit. Let them come and go. Part 2. How the third eye opens. The third eye opens through practices that cultivate attention, inquiry, and spaciousness. This is less spiritual performance, more quiet craft. Think of a lens being cleaned. The world doesn't change, clarity does. Practice 1. Notice the gap. Between stimulus and response, there is a sliver of time. If we can feel that subtle pause, one breath, one heartbeat, we can choose. A message arrives, anger flares, pause. The third eye notices the flare, not to suppress it, but to see it clearly. Sensation in the chest, heat in the face, a thought insisting unfair. Seeing clearly, it loosens. Practice 2. Ask Socratic questions. Gently. What am I assuming? What evidence would change my mind? Who benefits from this belief? If the opposite were true, what would I notice? Questions like these are not weapons, they're lanterns. They illuminate the cave we're in. Practice 3. Neti, neti. Not this, not that. From the Upanishads comes a method of negation. I am not this thought, not this sensation, not this role, not this fear. Not to deny them, but to discover what remains. As the layers fall away, a simpler presence appears, aware, open, untroubled. This is not an argument, it's a recognition. Practice 4. Compassion as perception. We think of compassion as a feeling, but it is also a way of seeing, one that includes the other in our field of care. When we meet someone else's pain without rushing to blame or fix, we glimpse the shared fabric. That thou art stops being a slogan, it becomes a posture. Part 3. A philosophical synthesis. Plato teaches the courage to turn from shadows to light. Socrates teaches the humility to question. The Buddha teaches the skill of attention and the release of clinging. The Upanishads teach the intimacy of being. Together, they suggest a path: turn, inquire, attend, belong. The third eye of the mind is this path walked with patience. What does this look like on an ordinary Tuesday? You wake with dread. Instead of fusing with it, you notice it. Weight in the stomach, thoughts predicting a future catastrophe. You ask, what assumption powers this? You see a story about failure that once kept you safe. You thank it for its service and set it down. You remember impermanence. Everything waves. You place your attention on a single breath. In that breath, you are not separate from the morning. The dread thins, not abolished, but no longer king. Or you disagree with someone you love. You feel the pull to win. You pause. Notice the craving to be right. You ask a Socratic question aloud. What would I believe if I were them? For a moment, you borrow their eyes. The conversation changes direction, not toward surrender, but toward understanding. Compassion has altered perception. We often imagine awakening as a spectacular event, but perhaps the third eye opens like dawn, not with a switch, but with a gradual brightening. One day, the same old problem appears and you realize you don't need the same old solution. You can stand in the cave and still face the light. You can live in a world of shadows without mistaking them for the sun. Socrates leaves us with a method, the Buddha with a medicine, the Upanishads with a mystery, Plato with a direction. None cancel the others. Together, they form a discipline of seeing. It asks for simple habits, repeated gently, a pause, a question,
a breath, a widening of care. Over time, the mind becomes transparent to itself. The world comes home. If there is a secret, it is not hidden. It is the ordinary miracle of attention. The third eye of the mind is not a superstition. It is our birthright to look clearly. Shadows will always dance, stories will always seduce, feelings will always arise. But the light is patient. Turn toward it often. Remember impermanence. Practice compassion. And when the old illusions return, as they will, smile. You have learned how to see. Thank you for watching. If this helped, pass the light along. And subscribe. See you in the next video.